The Amaranthin sat in its berth at Port Corvos, like a thing that had been forgotten and was trying not to mind. It was not a young ship. The hull plating had been replaced in sections over 3 decades, and the sections did not quite match. Some were the pale gray of standardized port metal. Some were darker, salvaged from a scrapped freighter that had been a different color entirely. The docking clamps held it the way you hold something that might come apart if you squeeze too hard. The cargo ramp had a wobble in the middle step that every crew member learned to step over, and no one ever fixed, because fixing it would mean taking the whole ramp assembly apart, and the ship worked. The ramp worked. Everything worked. Just not beautifully. Alara Venn sat in the cargo hold with her back against a shipping container that had been there for 3 weeks waiting for a buyer who had not yet paid his deposit. She was reading a document. The document was 3,892 pages long. She was on page 1,104. She had been at this for 9 days. The coffee beside her was cold. She drank it anyway. She was 52 years old. She had the kind of face that had settled into its own geography decades ago and had stopped apologizing for the terrain. Her hands were stained with grease and ink in roughly equal measure. Her jacket had a tear at the left elbow that she had patched twice and would probably need to patch again before winter. Her boots were the same boots she had been wearing when she walked away from her first ship 15 years ago, and they had been resoled so many times that the original leather was mostly a memory. She read page 1,105, then 1,106. The document was the Consolidated Port Authority Governance Framework, originally ratified in 2187 by the 9 founding member states of the Corvos Trade Coalition. It was the legal foundation for everything that moved through this sector: tariffs, inspections, licensing, enforcement. Every ship that docked at any port under coalition authority paid according to its schedules. Every captain knew the relevant sections. The sections on tariffs, the sections on inspections, the sections that told you what they could take and when and under what conditions. No one read the whole thing. It was 3,892 pages. It had been written by committees from 9 different political entities, each with their own legal traditions, each translation negotiated line by line, each line a compromise. Reading it in full was not something people did. People had cargo to move. People had crews to pay. People had lives that did not include spending 9 days sitting on a cold cargo hold floor reading the fine print of a document that was older than most of the ships in port. Alara read page 1,107. She read it the way you search a room for something you dropped, not quickly, not with the hope of being done soon, with the patience of someone who knows the thing is there somewhere, and the only way to find it is to look at every inch of floor. She had been a captain for 28 years. She had been inspected 143 times by coalition enforcement officers. She had paid 143 inspection fees. She had lost cargo to seizure on 11 separate occasions. She had filed appeals on 6 of those occasions. She had paid appeal fees on 6 of those occasions. She had lost every appeal. The appeal fees had cost more than the cargo, which was the point. That had always been the point. The system was not designed to be fair. It was designed to be expensive to fight. And she had learned, like every other captain in the sector, that the cheaper path was to pay what they asked and keep moving. She had kept moving for 28 years. She was not moving now. The Amaranthin had been detained at Port Corvos for 12 days. The official reason was a paperwork discrepancy in her cargo manifest. The real reason was that she had refused to pay a supplemental tariff that had been assessed after her cargo had already been inspected and cleared. The tariff was for 12,000 credits. It was assessed against a shipment of medical supplies bound for a colony station that had been waiting for them for 3 weeks. The supplies were perishable. The clock was running. The coalition enforcement officer who had delivered the assessment had been polite. They were always polite. He had explained that the supplemental tariff was a standard processing adjustment under Section 1207 of the governance framework. He had cited the section number. He had not quoted the text. He had not needed to. Captains did not ask to see the text. Captains paid. Alara had paid. She had paid because the medical supplies needed to move, and because 12,000 credits was less than the cost of the legal fight, and because she was tired. She was 52 years old. She had been fighting the coalition in one way or another for her entire career. She had won exactly none of those fights. She had learned to pick her battles, and she had learned that the battles you could win were the ones about cargo schedules and fuel efficiency, and whether you could run a secondary coolant line through the forward cargo bay without voiding your insurance. The battles about the law itself were not battles. They were just losses that took longer. She had paid. She had filed the payment. She had submitted the updated manifest. She had been told her ship would be cleared for departure within 6 hours. 6 hours had become 12. 12 had become 24. The medical supplies sat in her cargo hold, temperature controlled, the clock ticking. The coalition had not explained the delay. They had simply stopped responding to her requests for clearance. On the third day, she had gone to the Port Authority Administrative Office in person. She had stood in line for 2 hours. She had been told by a clerk with the flat affect of someone who processed complaints all day that her file was under review, and she would be contacted when the review was complete. On the 5th day, she had gone back. Same line, same clerk, same answer. On the 7th day, she had gone back with a copy of the Consolidated Port Authority Governance Framework. She had printed it from the public database. It was 3,892 pages. She had carried it in a crate because it was too heavy for a bag. She had set the crate on the counter in front of the clerk. She had asked to see the section that authorized indefinite detention of cleared cargo, pending unspecified review. The clerk had looked at the crate. The clerk had looked at her. The clerk had said, "I will escalate your inquiry to a supervisor." That had been 5 days ago. She had heard nothing. So she had started reading. She read on the floor of her cargo hold because her cabin was too small to spread the pages out, and because the medical supplies were behind her, and she could hear the coolant system cycling, and it reminded her that there was a reason she was doing this. Not just the 12,000 credits. Not just the 12 days. The supplies. The colony station. The people waiting. She read page 1108. She had developed a system. She read each section twice. The first time for the shape of it. The second time for the spaces between the words. She had learned, in 9 days of reading legal text written by 9 different committees over 30 years, that the spaces between the words were where the truth lived. The language was dense. It was designed to be dense. It was designed to mean exactly what it said, and nothing more, which meant that if you read it closely enough, you could find the places where the committees had disagreed, where one delegation had inserted a clause, and another had inserted an exception to that clause, and a third had inserted a condition on the exception. And in the architecture of those disagreements, there were gaps. She was looking for a gap. She found it at 3:14 in the morning on the 10th day. It was not a dramatic discovery. There was no moment of sudden clarity. There was just a line. Page 2441. Section 2108. Subsection C. She read it once and kept going because it did not look like anything. She read 3 more pages. Then she stopped. She went back. The section was about enforcement authority. It defined which coalition agencies had the power to detain vessels, levy fines, seize cargo, and suspend licenses. It was a long section. It had been amended 9 times, each amendment adding a new agency to the list. The coalition had grown over the decades. New members had joined. New enforcement bodies had been created. Each new body had been added to the list with its own enabling language, its own scope, its own limits. Subsection C was about the original enforcement agency, the Port Authority Inspectorate. It was the oldest part of the section. It had been written in 2187 by the 9 founding members before anyone had thought to add exceptions or conditions. It was short. It said, in the plain language of a document that had not yet learned to hide its meaning, that the Inspectorate had enforcement authority only over vessels that were registered in coalition member states. Alara read it 3 times. Then she read the amendments that had been added later. Each amendment added a new agency. Each new agency had its own enabling language. None of them had amended subsection C. The original text was still there, unchanged, unamended, still saying what it had always said. She sat very still. The coolant system cycled behind her. The cargo hold was dark, except for the small light clipped to her collar. The pages of the document were spread around her in piles organized by section. She had been sitting in the same position for hours. Her back hurt. Her eyes hurt. The coffee in her mug had been cold for so long it had developed a skin. She read subsection C again. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the coalition membership registry. She had looked at it before, in the ordinary course of business. She knew that her ship, the Amaranthan, was registered in the Callisto Free Port Registry. She knew that Callisto Free Port was not a coalition member. It had never been a coalition member. It was an independent port that operated outside the coalition's political structure, though its ships moved through coalition space because there was no other way to get from the outer colonies to the inner markets. She had always paid coalition tariffs. Every independent captain paid coalition tariffs. That was how the system worked. The coalition controlled the ports. The coalition controlled the transit lanes. If you wanted to move cargo, you paid what they asked. But subsection C did not say that. Subsection C said the Inspectorate had enforcement authority only over vessels registered in coalition member states. She pulled up the rest of the section. She read through the amendments again, carefully. She found 9 amendments adding new enforcement agencies. Each new agency's authority was defined differently. Some applied to all vessels in coalition space, regardless of registration. Some applied only to certain cargo types. Some applied only in certain sectors. The pattern was clear. Over the decades, the coalition had expanded its enforcement reach by creating new agencies with new authority, leaving the original Inspectorate's limited jurisdiction untouched. The Inspectorate was the agency that had detained her ship. The Inspectorate was the agency that had assessed the supplemental tariff. The Inspectorate was the agency that had stopped responding to her clearance requests. And the Inspectorate, according to subsection C, had no authority over her vessel. She sat with this for a long time. She did not feel triumphant. She felt something else, something quieter. The feeling of a door that had been closed for a very long time being pushed open by accident. The feeling of finding something that had been in plain sight for decades, waiting for someone to look at it the right way. She looked at the clock. 3:41 in the morning. She looked at her phone. No messages from the Port Authority. No clearance. The medical supplies had been in her hold for 12 days. Their temperature logs showed they were still within safe parameters, but the margin was shrinking. She closed her laptop. She stacked the pages of the document back into their crate. She stood up. Her legs were stiff. She had been sitting for 7 hours. She walked to the cargo hold door and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the containers behind her. The medical supplies. The shipment that was supposed to have been delivered 11 days ago. She thought about subsection C. She thought about 28 years of inspections and fees and seizures and appeals she had lost. She thought about the captains she knew, the ones who had given up, the ones who had sold their ships and taken jobs on coalition freighters because it was easier, the ones who were still fighting, still paying, still losing. She walked to her cabin. She sat at her small desk. She opened a new document. She typed a heading, Formal Jurisdictional Challenge. Then she typed the citation. Section 2108, subsection C. Then she typed the text of subc in full. Then she typed the relevant sections of the membership registry, showing that the Amaranthan was not registered in a coalition member state. Then she typed a single sentence. The Port Authority Inspectorate has no legal authority to detain this vessel, assess tariffs against it, or restrict its movement. She looked at the sentence. It was one sentence. It was the result of 28 years of losses, and 10 days of reading, and 3,892 pages of a document that no one had ever read all the way through. She saved the document. She printed it. She signed it. She did not send it. Not yet. She opened a second document. She started a list. She wrote the names of every captain she knew who ran an independent vessel through coalition space. She wrote 23 names in the first hour. She added 8 more before she went to sleep. She woke up 4 hours later and added 12 more. By the end of the second day, she had 47 names. She sent each of them a short message. The message said, "I have found something in the governance framework." Section 2108, subsection C, check your registration. I will call you in 3 days. She did not explain more than that. She did not want to explain more than that. She wanted them to read it for themselves. She wanted them to find it the way she had found it. Because finding it yourself was different. Finding it yourself meant you owned it. She called the first captain on the 3rd day. His name was Joran Hale. He ran a bulk hauler called the Persistent. He had been boarded 7 times in the past 5 years. He had paid everything they asked. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Elara," he said. His voice was tired. "What is this about?" "You read the section?" A pause. "I read it." "And?" Another pause, longer this time. "My ship is registered in the belt. Not a coalition member. Never has been. I know." "So they've been." He stopped. She heard him exhale. "They've been taking from me for 12 years. And the section says they can't. The inspectorate can't," she said. "There are other agencies. The inspectorate is the one that's been boarding you. The one that's been taking your cargo. The one that assessed the supplemental tariff that got me detained." He was quiet for a long time. She waited. "What are you going to do?" He said. She looked at the document on her screen, the one she had printed and signed and not sent. "I'm going to file a jurisdictional challenge," she said. "I'm going to send it to the Port Authority. I'm going to send it to the Coalition Administrative Office. I'm going to broadcast it on open channels so everyone can hear it. They'll deny it, probably. And then what?" She thought about the medical supplies in her cargo hold, the colony station waiting, the clock ticking. "Then we file another one," she said. "And another one. And every time they deny it, we file another one. And every time they take something from us, we add it to the list. And we keep the list. And we keep filing. And we keep reading." He was quiet again. She could hear him breathing. She could hear, in the quality of the silence, that he was looking at something. She knew what he was looking at. He was looking at the list of everything they had taken from him. The list he had never written down, but had carried in his head for 12 years. "Send me the form," he said. She sent it. She called the next captain, and the next, and the next. By the end of the week, she had 31 formal authorizations from independent captains to represent their claims in consolidated proceedings. She had the beginnings of a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet had columns: dates, vessels, cargo seized, fees paid, appeals filed, appeals lost. She added a new column: jurisdictional basis, section 2108C. The number at the bottom of the spreadsheet grew slowly. She did not look at it for more than a few seconds at a time. She was not ready to hold the full number in her head yet. The full number was too large. The full number was not about money. The full number was about 12 years of Joran Hale's life. 23 years of the captain after him. 28 years of her own life. A full number was made of time. She was not ready to hold that much time in her head. She filed the jurisdictional challenge on the 15th day of her detention. She filed it through the Port Authority's official channels. She attached the text of Section 2108, C. She attached her ship's registration documents. She attached the list of authorizations from the other captains. She noted the time of filing. She added the filing number to her spreadsheet. Then she opened the broadband channel. She read the challenge aloud. She read it slowly, clearly, the way you read something that needs to be understood. She read the citation. She read the text of subsection C. She read the sentence she had written. The Port Authority Inspectorate has no legal authority to detain this vessel, assess tariffs against it, or restrict its movement. She finished reading. She closed the channel. She waited. She did not have to wait long. The response came from the Port Authority at 08:14 the next morning. It was a form letter. She recognized the template. She had received versions of it before, for other challenges, other appeals, other attempts to fight a system that was not designed to be fought. The letter said her challenge had been received and would be reviewed. It said the review process typically took 30 to 45 days. It said her vessel would remain detained pending the outcome of the review. She read the letter. She set it down. She picked up her phone. She called the colony station that was waiting for the medical supplies. She spoke to a woman named Dr. Amara Chun, who had been calling her every day for 2 weeks to ask when the supplies would arrive. She told Dr. Chun about the detention. She told her about the jurisdictional challenge. She told her that she did not know how long it would take. Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The insulin will expire in 8 days." Alara closed her eyes. "I know," she said. She hung up. She sat at her desk for a long time. She looked at the photograph on the wall above her desk. It was a photograph of her first ship, the Meridian, a small freighter she had owned before the Amaranthan. The Meridian had been impounded by the Coalition 13 years ago. She had fought the impound for 6 months. She had paid lawyers. She had filed appeals. She had spent money she did not have. In the end, the Meridian had been sold at auction. She had watched it go. She had not owned another ship for 3 years after that. She looked at the photograph now. She looked at it the way you look at something that has been on the wall for a long time, present but not examined. She looked at it, and she thought about the Meridian, and she thought about the medical supplies in her cargo hold, and she thought about the spreadsheet on her laptop with its growing list of names and numbers. She picked up her phone again. She called the one person she had not called yet. A man named Elias Voss. No relation. A different Voss entirely. He ran a shipping cooperative out of the belt. 37 ships. 41 captains. He was the largest independent operator in the sector. He was also the most careful. He had never filed an appeal. He had never contested a tariff. He paid what they asked and moved his cargo and kept his head down. He answered on the 4th ring. "Alara," he said, "I've been getting messages." "From the other captains?" "From everyone." "What did you find?" She told him. She explained Section 2108C. She explained the registration issue. She explained that the Inspectorate's authority was limited to Coalition-registered vessels, and that none of the independent ships were Coalition-registered. He listened. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You're sure about this?" "I've read the section. I've read the amendments. I've checked the membership registry. The Inspectorate's jurisdiction is clear. And you think they're going to let you walk out of here with your cargo and your ship and your 12,000 credits?" "No," she said. "I think they're going to fight." "Then what's the point?" She looked at the photograph on her wall. The Meridian. The ship she had lost. "The point," she said, "is that I've been paying them for 28 years because I thought the law was on their side. The law is not on their side. The law has never been on their side. They've been relying on us not reading the document. That's all it's ever been. That's all it ever is." He was quiet for a long time. "Send me the section," he said. She sent it. She waited. Elias Voss called back in 4 hours. That was faster than Ilara had expected. She had thought it would take him at least a day to read the section, check his registration, verify the membership status of the Belt Registry against the Coalition's official list. She had thought he would want to be certain before he called. She had been right about the certainty. She had underestimated his speed. He was a methodical man. She knew that about him from years of working the same routes, sharing dock space at the same ports, exchanging the brief professional courtesies of people who operated in the same small world. He was the kind of captain who kept his maintenance logs in triplicate and his insurance premiums paid 6 months in advance. He did not take risks. He did not make moves without knowing where they would land. When he called, his voice was different, not uncertain. Something else. The voice of a man who had just realized that the ground he had been standing on for 20 years was not ground at all. "I've checked everything," he said, 3 times. "My ships. The registration status of every vessel in the cooperative. The coalition membership list. The amendments to Section 2108. The case law. The administrative rulings. Everything. And it's there. It's been there the whole time. Section 2108C has never been amended. The inspectorate's jurisdiction has never been expanded. Every enforcement action they've taken against independent vessels for the past 30 years has been—" He stopped. She heard him exhale. "There's a word for it." "I know the word," she said. He did not say it. Neither did she. They both knew the word. They both knew what it meant to say it out loud. The word was piracy. Under the Coalition's own laws, enforcement actions taken without jurisdiction were not enforcement. They were theft. The word had weight. It had consequences. Once you said it, you could not unsay it. "How many ships in your cooperative?" she asked. 37. "All independent registry?" "All of them. Belt Registry. Callisto Registry. 3 on the Titan Independent Register. None are Coalition members. None have ever been Coalition members." She opened her spreadsheet. She added a new row. She typed *Elias Voss Cooperative, 37 vessels, status, pending documentation *. She looked at the number at the bottom of the spreadsheet. It was larger now. Not dramatically larger, but larger. And the shape of it was changing. It was not just a list of individual captains anymore. It was becoming something else. A network. A structure. "Send me your documentation," she said. "Registration certificates for each vessel. A list of enforcement actions against your ships in the past 10 years. Tariffs paid. Cargo seized. Fees. Everything you have. I'll have my accountant pull the records. It'll take a few days. We don't have a few days. My cargo expires in 8 days. The insulin in my hold is for a colony station. People are waiting." A pause. "I understand." "No," she said. "I don't think you do. I've been sitting in this dock for 15 days. The Coalition has my ship. They have my cargo. They have my money. And they have a law that says they can't do any of it. I'm done waiting. I'm done filing forms and paying fees and watching them take what they want. I'm done being patient." She had not meant to say that. She had not meant to let her voice rise. She had not meant to let him hear the thing that had been building in her chest for 15 days, for 28 years, for the 13 years since she watched the Meridian being towed away. But it was out now. It was in her voice and in the silence between them, and she could not take it back. "I'll have the records to you by tomorrow," Elias said. He hung up. The records arrived at 0600 the next morning. Not from Elias's accountant, from Elias himself. He had spent the night pulling them himself. She could see it in the timestamps on the files. 234, 341, 0452. He had not slept. He had sat at his desk in whatever office he kept on whatever station he was docked at, and he had gone through 37 ships' worth of records, one by one, and he had sent them to her as he finished them. She opened the first file. It was a registration certificate for a vessel called the Steadfast. The registry was the Belt Independent Port Authority, not a coalition number. She added it to the spreadsheet. She added the vessel's enforcement history, which Elias had compiled in a separate document. The Steadfast had been boarded 12 times in 9 years. 12 inspection fees, 3 cargo seizures, 1 license suspension that had cost the ship 3 weeks of work. She calculated the total. She applied the interest rate that was standard in coalition administrative law for unlawfully seized funds. She entered the number. She opened the next file, and the next, and the next. By noon, she had entered 12 vessels. The spreadsheet was growing. It was not just a list anymore. It was becoming a document, a record, an account of something that had been happening for a very long time, quietly, invisibly, to people who had no way to fight it and no one to fight for them. She stopped at 1400 to eat. She had not eaten since the day before. She found a protein bar in her cabin, the last one from a package she had opened a week ago. It tasted like cardboard. She ate it anyway. She drank water from the galley tap. She stood at the small window in her cabin and looked out at the dock. Port Corvos was a busy station. There were always ships coming and going, cargo moving, the ordinary machinery of commerce operating at scale. She could see 3 vessels from her window. A bulk carrier being loaded at the adjacent berth. A passenger shuttle waiting for clearance. A small freighter, not unlike her own, sitting dark at the far end of the dock, its running lights off, its ramp down. She wondered if that captain was waiting too. Waiting for clearance. Waiting for a decision. Waiting for someone to tell them they could move. She went back to her desk. She opened the next file. The call from the Port Authority came at 1600. It was not a response to her jurisdictional challenge. She had not expected one that quickly. The 30-to-40-5-day review window they had quoted was a stalling tactic. She knew that. They knew that. Everyone knew that. The call was about something else. It was a woman. The voice was professional, calibrated. The voice of someone who had spent years in an administrative role and had learned exactly how to sound helpful while saying nothing of substance. "Captain Van," the woman said, "this is Administrator Nalani from the Port Authority Compliance Office. I'm calling regarding your vessel's detention status." Ilara said nothing. She had learned over 28 years that silence was often more effective than speech in conversations like this. It made people uncomfortable. It made them fill the space. Administrators like this one were trained to respond to questions and objections. Silence was not in their script. "There has been some confusion regarding your file," the woman continued. "The supplemental tariff assessment that triggered your detention appears to have been processed under an incorrect code. We are reviewing the matter and expect to have it resolved shortly." Ilara waited. "In the meantime, we wanted to inform you that your vessel's detention status remains in effect pending the completion of this review. We appreciate your patience." "My cargo expires in 7 days," Ilara said. A pause. The administrator had not expected her to speak. She could hear it in the quality of the silence. "I understand your concern, Captain. I will note the time sensitivity in your file. Can I speak to someone who can actually release my ship?" "Captain, the review process is—" "I've been through your review process. I've been through it 12 times in 28 years. Every time, it takes exactly as long as it takes for my cargo to expire or my operating budget to run out or my patience to break. And then I pay whatever you tell me to pay and I leave. That's the process. That's always been the process. But this time, I'm not paying." She had not planned to say that. The words had come out before she could stop them. She heard them hanging in the air, too honest, too direct, the kind of words you did not say to coalition administrators, because there was no percentage in it. They had the power. You did not. Telling them you were not going to pay was not a strategy. It was just noise. But she had said it. And she did not take it back. "Captain," the administrator said, and her voice was different now, less polished, less automatic. "I would strongly advise you to—" "I filed a jurisdictional challenge," Elara said. "Section 2108, C. Your inspectorate has no authority over my vessel. I've documented the challenge. I've broadcast it on open channels. I've notified 47 other independent captains who are preparing their own challenges. I've notified the Voss Cooperative, which has 37 vessels. I've notified the Belt Registry. I've notified the Callisto Registry. I've notified the Titan Independent Register. And I've documented everything. Every tariff, every seizure, every fee. Every day my ship has sat in this dock, I have a spreadsheet. And it's getting larger." She stopped. She had not meant to say any of this. She had not meant to lay out her entire strategy to a mid-level administrator on a recorded line. But the words were out now. They were out and they were true, and she did not want to take them back. The administrator was quiet for a long time. "Captain," she said finally, "I think you should speak to someone in legal affairs." "I think you're right," Elara said. The call ended. She did not hear from legal affairs that day. She did not hear from them the next day. She worked on the spreadsheet. She added the rest of Elias's vessels. She added the captains who had started calling her back, the ones who had read Section 2108C and checked their registrations and done the math. She added their numbers to the spreadsheet. She applied the interest rate. She watched the total grow. By the end of the third day, she had documentation from 63 vessels. The spreadsheet had expanded to 9 columns. She had added a column for the date of each vessel's first recorded enforcement action. Some went back 15 years. One went back 22. That was a captain named Suleiman Okonkwo, who ran a small freighter called the Kano Trader and had been paying coalition tariffs since before the coalition had formalized its enforcement procedures. He had sent her his records in a physical folder delivered by a courier who had taken 3 days to reach Port Corvos. The folder was thick. The pages were yellowed. Some of them were handwritten. Suleiman was 74 years old. He had been saving everything for 22 years, waiting for someone to ask for it. She entered his records manually, one by one. It took her 6 hours. When she finished, she looked at the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet. She did not look at it for long. She closed the laptop. She went to the galley. She made coffee. She stood at the window and watched the dock. The small freighter at the far end of the dock had its running lights on now. It was moving. Someone had been cleared to leave. She watched it pull away from the dock, slow and careful, the way ships moved in port, not fast, not dramatic, just a vessel doing what vessels did. It slid out of the dock and into the transit lane and disappeared around the curve of the station. She thought about the insulin in her hold. 6 days now. The temperature logs were still green. The margin was shrinking. She finished her coffee. She went back to her desk. She opened the laptop. She started a new document. It was a letter. She addressed it to the Coalition Legal Affairs Office. She cited Section 2108C. She cited her jurisdictional challenge. She cited the 47 captains who had authorized her to represent them. She cited the Voss Cooperative. She cited Suleiman Okonkwo's 22 years of records. She cited the spreadsheet. She wrote, "The Port Authority Inspectorate has been enforcing tariffs and levying seizures against vessels outside its jurisdiction for a period of no less than 22 years. The total value of unlawfully collected funds with interest calculated at the statutory rate, is enclosed. She attached the spreadsheet. She attached the total. She read the letter twice. Then she deleted it. She started again. This time, she did not attach the total. She did not attach the spreadsheet. She wrote a different letter, shorter, one sentence. Asterisk, I am prepared to file a formal piracy claim against the Port Authority Inspectorate under Coalition Administrative Code Article 7, citing Section 2108, C, and 22 years of enforcement actions conducted without jurisdiction. She read it. She did not delete it. She sent it. The response came in 2 hours, not a form letter. A personal communication from someone named Verin Thorne, Deputy Director of Coalition Legal Affairs. It was addressed to her directly. It was not friendly. Captain Venn, your communication of this date contains serious allegations that you are not in a position to substantiate. The Port Authority Inspectorate operates under the authority granted by the Consolidated Port Authority Governance Framework, which has been interpreted consistently by coalition courts for 3 decades. Your interpretation of Section 2108C is incorrect and has no basis in established case law. I strongly advise you to withdraw your allegations and cooperate with the standard review process currently underway. Failure to do so may result in additional penalties, including but not limited to license revocation, impoundment of your vessel, and personal liability for administrative costs. I am available to discuss this matter at your earliest convenience. She read the letter twice. She read it the way she had read Section 2108C on the floor of her cargo hold at 3 o'clock in the morning. Slowly, carefully, looking for the spaces between the words. The spaces were there. They were always there. He had not denied that Section 2108C said what she said it said. He had said her interpretation was incorrect. He had said the framework had been interpreted differently by coalition courts. He had not cited a single case. He had not quoted a single ruling. He had made a claim about what the law meant without providing the law that made it mean that. Because there was no law that made it mean that, there were rulings. She had looked them up after her conversation with Elias. There were 4 cases in the past 30 years where the coalition courts had addressed the jurisdiction of the inspectorate. In each case, the court had ruled that the inspectorate's authority extended to all vessels in coalition space, regardless of registration. But in each case, the court had not cited Section 2108C. They had cited something else, a later amendment, a different section, a principle of customary authority that had been asserted without being written into the framework. The courts had not reinterpreted Section 2108C. They had ignored it. They had ruled around it. They had made it disappear by refusing to look at it. She opened a new document. She wrote, Deputy Director Thorne, I have read the 4 cases you did not cite. None of them address Section 2108C. None of them amend it. None of them repeal it. It is still in the framework. It still says what it says. My vessel is not registered in a coalition member state. Your inspectorate has no jurisdiction over it. Every enforcement action they have taken against me is unlawful. Every tariff I have paid is recoverable. Every day my ship sits in this dock is a new violation. I am not going to withdraw my allegations. I am going to add to them. Every day I will add a new line to my spreadsheet. Every day the number will grow. When it is large enough, I will file it, not as a challenge, not as an appeal, as an invoice. I am available to discuss payment terms. She sent it. She did not hear from Deputy Director Thorne again. She heard from someone else, a woman named Kaylin Weiss. She called at 08:00 the next morning. Her voice was different from Thorne's, not adversarial, not friendly either, something in between. The voice of someone who had been given a difficult problem and was trying to solve it without making it worse. Captain Venn, she said, I'm special counsel to the Coalition Legal Affairs Office. I've been asked to review your jurisdictional challenge. Elara waited. I've read Section 2108C. I've read your filing. I've reviewed the registration status of your vessel. I've also reviewed the relevant case law and administrative rulings. And I think there's room for discussion. Elara said nothing. She had learned 28 years ago that when a coalition official said there's room for discussion, what they meant was we are willing to offer you something small so you will go away. She had accepted those offers before. A reduced fee here, a faster clearance there, a promise that the next inspection would be easier. She had taken what they offered, and she had gone away, and nothing had changed. I'm listening, she said. We are prepared to release your vessel from detention. We are prepared to waive the supplemental tariff that triggered the detention. We are prepared to return the 12,000 credits you paid. In exchange, you will withdraw your jurisdictional challenge and sign a statement affirming that the Port Authority Inspectorate has proper authority over your vessel. Elara looked at the spreadsheet on her screen, the one with 63 vessels, the one with 22 years of Suleiman Okonkwo's records, the one with the total she had not let herself look at for more than a few seconds at a time. That's not enough, she said. Captain, this is a generous. That's not enough, she said again. You're offering to return what you took from me in the past 2 weeks. What about the past 28 years? What about the other 63 vessels? What about Suleiman Okonkwo, who has been paying you for 22 years because he didn't know he didn't have to? A pause. The statute of limitations for administrative claims is, I don't care about your statute of limitations. Your statute of limitations is something you wrote to protect yourself. I care about Section 2108C. It's still in the framework. It hasn't been amended. It hasn't been repealed. It hasn't been overruled. It's the law. It has always been the law. And you have been violating it for 22 years. Another pause. Longer this time. What do you want? Kaylin Weiss said. Elara looked at the photograph on her wall. The Meridian. The ship she had lost. I want you to acknowledge that the Inspectorate has no jurisdiction over independent vessels. I want you to issue a formal ruling that Section 2108, Kaya means what it says. I want you to return everything you've taken from every independent vessel for the past 22 years. With interest. That's not possible. Then we have nothing to discuss. She hung up. She sat at her desk for a long time after the call. The ship was quiet. The dock was quiet. The coolant system cycled behind her, keeping the insulin cold, keeping the clock running. She had 5 days now. Maybe 4. The margin was shrinking. She looked at the spreadsheet again. She let herself look at the total this time. Not for a few seconds. For a minute. For 5 minutes. She let the number sit in her head. She let it be as large as it was. She let it be the sum of 22 years of work and waiting and loss. She did not flinch. She closed the spreadsheet. She opened a new document. She started writing. She wrote a public statement. She addressed it to every independent captain in the sector. She explained Section 2108C. She explained the registration issue. She explained that the coalition had been collecting tariffs and seizing cargo for decades without legal authority. She explained that she had filed a jurisdictional challenge. She explained that the coalition had offered to release her ship if she would withdraw the challenge and sign a statement affirming their authority. She explained that she had refused. She wrote, I do not know how this will end. I do not know if I will get my ship back. I do not know if the coalition will release my cargo or return what they have taken. But I know that the law is on our side. It has always been on our side. We just never read it. We never had the time. We were too busy moving cargo and paying fees and fighting the fights we thought we could win. We did not have time to read 3,892 pages of a document written by people who were counting on us not reading it. but someone read it. Someone always reads it. That is how these things work. Someone reads the document that everyone else signed without reading. Someone finds the clause that everyone else forgot. Someone waits. And then someone uses it. I am using it. She read the statement twice. She made one small change. Then she broadcasted on open channels. She watched the counter on her navigation display. The one she had coded herself 3 weeks ago, on a night when she could not sleep and the dock was quiet and she had needed something to do with her hands while she thought. The counter tracked the number of ships that opened a broadcast channel on the same frequency within response range. It started at 1. It went to 4. It went to 12. It went to 31. She watched it climb. The counter hit 47 before she stopped watching. It was not a large number by any objective measure. Port Corvos handled hundreds of vessels a day. 47 ships listening to a broadcast from a detained freighter was not a movement. It was not a protest. It was not the beginning of anything that anyone in the Coalition Legal Affairs office would lose sleep over. But it was a number. And numbers, Ilara had learned over the past 3 weeks, had a way of becoming other numbers. They accumulated. They compounded. They grew in ways that were difficult to predict and harder to stop. She closed the broadcast channel. She made coffee. She stood at the galley window and looked at the dock. The berth next to hers was empty now. The bulk carrier that had been loading for the past 2 days had finished its operations and departed sometime in the night. The dock was quiet. The lights were the pale blue of station night cycle, dimmed but not dark, the way all stations were at this hour. Somewhere in the distance, a loading drone was moving cargo. She could hear the low hum of its thrusters, the mechanical patience of a machine doing work that did not require hurry. She thought about the 47 ships that had listened to her broadcast. Some of them were probably still listening. Some of them had probably moved on, their captains already back to the ordinary business of running cargo and paying fees and not reading documents. But some of them were probably doing what she had done, sitting in their cabins or their cargo holds or their navigation decks, pulling up Section 2108C on their screens, reading it for themselves, checking their registrations, doing the math. That was all she needed. The math was on her side. The math was in the framework. The math was in the spreadsheet that she had been building for 3 weeks, the one with 63 vessels and 22 years of records, and a total that she had finally let herself look at without flinching. The math was patient. The math did not care about statutes of limitation or administrative convenience, or the fact that a mid-level coalition official had offered to release her ship if she would just go away. The math was just numbers. And numbers, once they were in the world, could not be unmade. She finished her coffee. She went back to her desk. The message from Suleiman Okonkwo arrived at 0730. She had not expected to hear from him directly. He was 74 years old. He ran a single freighter on a route that kept him in the outer sectors, away from the busy ports, away from the coalition enforcement wings that patrolled the core lanes. He had sent her his records through a courier because he did not use email. He had handwritten his letters because he did not use a computer. He was a man who had been running cargo for 50 years, who had learned the trade before there were digital manifests and automated filing systems and coalition enforcement wings that could track your every movement across the sector. The message was on paper. It had been delivered by a dock worker who had been paid to bring it to her berth. She opened the envelope. The paper inside was the same thin, slightly yellowed stock he had used for his records. The handwriting was the same careful script, each letter formed with the precision of a man who had learned to write before keyboards existed. Captain Venn, I heard your broadcast. My grandson, who helps me with the ship's systems, played it for me on his tablet. He explained to me what you found. The section, the registration, the jurisdiction. He read it to me twice. I understood it the second time. I have been running the Kano Trader for 52 years. I have been paying the Coalition for 43 of those years, ever since they started charging tariffs on the outer routes. I have never missed a payment. I have never contested an inspection. I have never filed an appeal. I have done what they asked because it was easier than fighting. I am 74 years old. I have been saving my records for 22 years. I do not know why I save them. I am not a man who plans for things. I am a man who works and sleeps and works again. But I save them, and now you have them. I do not know what will happen to your ship. I do not know what will happen to your cargo. But I want you to know that I am not waiting for you to win this for me. I am filing my own challenge. My grandson is helping me. He is good with computers. He says we can do it today. You said in your broadcast that someone always reads the document. Someone always finds the clause. I want you to know that I have read it now. I am 74 years old. I have been paying for 43 years, and I have read it. Suleiman Okonkwo. She read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and put it in the pocket of her jacket, the jacket without the tear, the one she had worn to the Port Authority office when she had carried the crate of documents to the clerk's counter. It still smelled like the ship. It smelled like the cargo hold and the coolant system and the coffee she had been drinking for 3 weeks. It smelled like work. She picked up her phone. She called Elias Voss. He answered on the first ring. I heard your broadcast, he said. His voice was different from the last time they had spoken, less careful, less guarded, the voice of a man who had made a decision and was not looking back. How many? She asked. Of my ships? All 37. Every captain in the cooperative has filed a jurisdictional challenge. We did it yesterday. We did it together. We had a meeting. The first meeting we've ever had where we didn't talk about cargo schedules or fuel prices. What did you talk about? He was quiet for a moment. She heard him exhale. We talked about how long we've been paying. We talked about the seizures, the inspections, the fees, the ships we've lost. Some of the captains, the younger ones, they didn't know. They thought the tariffs were legal. They thought the coalition had the right. We had to explain to them that it wasn't about what the coalition said. It was about what the framework said. And the framework said, I know what it says. Yeah, you do. You're the one who read it. She heard something in his voice. Not gratitude, something more complicated. The sound of a man who had spent 20 years doing what he was told, and was only now understanding that he had never had to. What about the other captains? She asked. The ones who aren't in your cooperative. I've been calling them. Everyone I know. Everyone who runs independent. Some of them have already filed. Some of them are waiting to see what happens. Some of them think we're crazy. And the ones who think we're crazy? They're going to file anyway. Once they do the math. She looked at her spreadsheet. The total was still there. The number she had let herself look at for 5 minutes yesterday. It was not a small number. It was not a number that could be ignored once you had seen it. It was the kind of number that, once you knew it existed, became impossible to unknow. What's the count? She asked. Total filings. I've been tracking it, not systematically, just a number I keep in my head. 112 as of this morning. That's my ships, your captains, the ones who called me back, the ones who called each other. 112 separate jurisdictional challenges, all citing Section 2108C, all filed in the past 72 hours. She closed her eyes. 112. That was not a small number. That was not a number that a coalition administrative office could process quietly, behind closed doors, without anyone noticing. That was a number that required attention. That was a number that required a response. It's going to get larger, she said. I know. Kaylin Weiss called me yesterday. She offered to release my ship if I withdrew the challenge and signed a statement affirming their authority. What did you say? I said that wasn't enough. I told her I wanted a formal ruling. I wanted them to acknowledge that Section 2108 C means what it says. I wanted them to return everything they've taken from every independent vessel for the past 22 years. What did she say? She said that wasn't possible. He laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had spent 20 years being told that things were not possible, and was only now understanding that not possible meant not convenient. She's going to call you again, he said. I know. This time, she's going to offer more. I know. What are you going to say? She looked at the photograph on her wall, the Meridian, the ship she had lost. She looked at it the way she had been looking at it for 13 years, present but not examined, a thing on the wall that she had stopped seeing a long time ago. I'm going to say the same thing, she said. That's not enough. Kaylin Weiss called again at 1400. Kalara let it ring 3 times before she answered. She did not want to seem eager. She did not want to seem like she was waiting for the call, even though she was. Captain Venn, Kaylin said. Her voice was different from yesterday, less professional, less controlled. The voice of someone who had spent the past 24 hours in meetings she had not wanted to have, delivering news that no one had wanted to hear. Special Counsel. The filing volume has increased significantly since we last spoke. I know. We have received 112 jurisdictional challenges in the past 3 days. The number is growing. Our processing system is not designed to handle this volume. Elara said nothing. The deputy director has asked me to explore alternative resolutions. He is prepared to expand the terms of the offer I made yesterday. She waited. We are prepared to release your vessel. We are prepared to waive all outstanding fees and tariffs associated with your current detention. We are prepared to return the 12,000 credits you paid. We are also prepared to extend the same terms to any other vessel that withdraws its jurisdictional challenge within the next 30 days. She kept waiting. That's the offer. That's the same offer, Elara said. You've just made it bigger. It's still the same thing. You're offering to return what you took in the past few weeks. What about the past few years? What about the past 22 years? Captain, the administrative burden of I don't care about your administrative burden. I care about the law. Section 2108C has been violated for 22 years. You know it. I know it. The 112 captains who filed challenges know it. The only question is whether you're going to acknowledge it. Kaylin was quiet for a moment. Elara could hear her breathing. She could hear, in the quality of the silence, that the woman on the other end of the line was thinking about something, weighing something, trying to decide how much to say. I read your spreadsheet, Kaylin said finally. Her voice was lower now, less formal, the one you attached to the letter you deleted. I don't know if you know this, but when you delete a file on a coalition network, it's not actually deleted. It goes to a backup server. Someone flagged it. Someone sent it to me. Elara's hand tightened on the phone. She had not known that. She should have known that. She had been using coalition network infrastructure for 3 weeks, filing documents, sending messages, broadcasting on open channels. Everything she did was being recorded. Everything she did was being watched. I read the whole thing, Kaylin continued. 63 vessels, 22 years of records, every tariff, every seizure, every fee, the interest calculations, the total at the bottom. And it's not going to happen. The coalition is not going to pay that number. They're not going to acknowledge that number. They're not going to let you put that number into the public record. That number is, she stopped. Elara heard her exhale. That number is too large. It's too large for the system to absorb. It's too large for the coalition to admit to. It's not about the money. It's about what the money represents. 22 years of enforcement actions. 22 years of tariffs and seizures and fees. If that number goes into the public record, if the coalition acknowledges that all of it was unlawful, then the system changes. A long silence. Yes, Kalen said. Alara looked at her spreadsheet, the one that Kalen Weiss had read, the one with the total at the bottom, that she had let herself look at for 5 minutes, that she had let be as large as it was, that she had not flinched from. The total was not just a number. It was a record. It was a history. It was 22 years of work and waiting and loss, added up, calculated, made visible. That's what I want, she said. The system changes. That's not what the deputy director wants. I don't care what the deputy director wants. I care about what the framework says. Section 2108, C, says the inspector has jurisdiction only over vessels registered in coalition member states. My vessel is not registered in a coalition member state. The Kano trader is not registered in a coalition member state. The Steadfast is not registered in a coalition member state. Every vessel in the Voss Cooperative is not registered in a coalition member state. The law is clear. The law has always been clear. The only reason it hasn't mattered is because no one read it. Now people are reading it. 112 people are reading it. Tomorrow there will be more. The day after that, more. You can't unread something. You can't put the words back in the document. You can't make people forget that they saw them. She stopped. She had not meant to say all of that. The words had come out the way they had come out when she had told the administrator that she was not going to pay. Too honest, too direct. The kind of words that you could not take back. But she did not want to take them back. She wanted them to be in the world. She wanted them to be in Kalen Weiss's head, the way Section 2108 was in her head, the way the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet was in her head, the way the photograph of the meridian was in her head, present but not examined for 13 years, and now examined. Kalen was quiet for a long time. I'll talk to the deputy director again, she said finally. You do that. She hung up. The counter on her navigation display was at 83 now. She had not been watching it. She had been working. The spreadsheet, the filings, the calls. But every time she looked up, the number was larger. She did not know how it was counting. She had coded it herself 3 weeks ago, on a night when she could not sleep, and the dock was quiet, and she had needed something to do with her hands while she thought. She had coded it to track the number of ships that opened a broadcast channel on her frequency within response range. But she had not coded it to count only once. She had not coded it to reset. It was just counting. Every time a ship opened a channel, the number went up. And every time a ship closed a channel and opened it again, the number went up again. It was not a clean count. It was not a precise measure of anything. But it was a number, and it was growing. She looked at it now. 83. It had been 47 when she stopped watching. Now it was 83. That was not 112. The counter was not counting filings. It was counting something else. Attention. Awareness. The slow accumulation of people who had heard something and were trying to hear it again, to understand it, to decide what it meant for them. She thought about Suleiman Okonkwo's grandson, playing her broadcast on his tablet. She thought about Suleiman, 74 years old, reading Section 2108C for the first time, understanding it the second time. She thought about Elias Voss, holding a meeting with his captains, explaining to the younger ones that the tariffs they had been paying were not legal, that the coalition had never had the right, that the law had been on their side the whole time, and they had not known it. She thought about the 112 jurisdictional challenges that had been filed in the past 3 days. She thought about the number that was not on her counter, the number that was in Elias's head, the number that was growing in a different way, the number that the Coalition Legal Affairs Office was trying to process, the number that was too large for their system to handle. She thought about Kalen Weiss, reading her spreadsheet, Seeing the total at the bottom, understanding what it meant, the system changes. That was what she had said. That was what the total represented. Not just money, not just 22 years of tariffs and seizures and fees. The system itself, the way things worked. The assumption that independent captains would pay what they were told because they did not have time to read the document. That assumption was breaking. It was breaking because one person had read the document. One person had sat on a cold cargo hold floor for 10 days and read 3,892 pages of legal text until she found the one clause that made everything else make sense. She closed her eyes. She was tired. She had been tired for 3 weeks. She had been tired for 28 years. She had been tired since the day she watched the Meridian being towed away. But the tiredness was different now. It was not the tiredness of fighting a fight she could not win. It was the tiredness of a machine that had been running at full power for a very long time, and was only now beginning to slow down, to see the shape of what it had built, to understand that it did not have to run forever. She opened her eyes. She looked at the photograph on her wall, the Meridian, the ship she had lost. She looked at it for a long time, not the way she had looked at it for 13 years, present but not examined. She looked at it the way you look at something you have carried with you for so long that you have forgotten it is there. You look at it, and you remember why you started carrying it in the first place. She stood up. She walked to the wall. She took the photograph down. She held it in her hands. The paper was old. The edges were soft. The image was grainy, taken from a dock camera at a distance, a small freighter being towed out of port. She had not looked at it directly for years. She had kept it on the wall because she had needed something to remind her. But she had not looked at it. She had let it become part of the wall, part of the background, something she did not see. She looked at it now. She saw the Meridian. She saw the shape of it, the way the hull plates caught the dock lights, the way the name was still visible across the bow, even at that distance. She saw the tugs around it, the coalition enforcement skiff trailing behind, the whole apparatus of a system that had taken something from her because she had not known how to fight it. She put the photograph on her desk. She propped it against her laptop screen. She looked at it while she worked. A message from Elias came at 2100. Not a call. A text, 3 words, 204. She read it. She did not reply. She looked at the photograph of the Meridian. She looked at the counter on her navigation display, which had stopped climbing and settled at 97. She looked at her spreadsheet, which she had not closed since Kaylin Weiss told her she had read it, which had the total at the bottom that she had finally let herself look at. The total that was too large for the coalition to admit to, the total that meant the system changes. 204. That was a number that could not be ignored. That was a number that required a response. That was a number that, once it was in the world, could not be unmade. She opened a new document. She wrote a new letter. She addressed it to Kaylin Weiss, Special Counsel, Coalition Legal Affairs Office. She wrote one sentence. My spreadsheet is still growing. She sent it. The response came at 06:00 the next morning. Not from Kaylin Weiss. Not from Varenthorn. From someone Ilara had never heard of. A name she did not recognize. The title was long. Director of Coalition Administrative Operations. The letter was on official stationery. It was signed. It was not a form letter. Captain Venn, I am writing to inform you that the Port Authority Inspectorate has completed its review of your vessel's detention status. Effective immediately, the detention order on the Amaranthin is lifted. Your vessel is cleared for departure. The supplemental tariff assessed against your cargo has been voided. The 12,000 credits you paid will be returned to your account within 5 business days. This decision has been made without prejudice to any pending jurisdictional challenges. The Coalition's legal position regarding Section 2108C remains unchanged. However, In the interest of resolving the current administrative backlog, the Inspectorate has been directed to suspend enforcement actions against vessels operating under independent registry pending further review. Your vessel may depart at your convenience. She read the letter 3 times. She read it the way she had read Section 2108C on the floor of her cargo hold at 3 o'clock in the morning. Slowly, carefully, looking for the spaces between the words. The spaces were there, without prejudice. That meant nothing. That meant the Coalition was not admitting anything. That meant they were clearing her ship without changing their legal position. That meant they could do the same thing to the next independent vessel that docked at a Coalition port, and the vessel after that, and the vessel after that. Suspended, not ended, not rescinded, not ruled unlawful. Suspended. The word meant paused. It meant temporary. It meant until we figure out how to do this differently. But it also meant something else. It meant that the Coalition had blinked. It meant that 204 jurisdictional challenges, filed in 4 days, had been enough to overwhelm their processing system. It meant that someone in the Coalition Legal Affairs Office had made a calculation. The cost of fighting 204 challenges, of litigating Section 2108C in front of an arbitrator, of letting the public record show that independent captains were reading the framework and finding the clause that the Coalition had been ignoring for 22 years. That cost was higher than the cost of letting one detained freighter go. She looked at the photograph on her desk, the Meridian, propped against her laptop screen. She had been looking at it for hours last night, while she waited for a response she had not known was coming. She looked at it now. The small freighter being towed out of port. The ship she had lost 13 years ago, because she had not known how to fight. She looked at the letter. She read it again. She read the line about enforcement actions being suspended pending further review. She read it the way you read something that you know is not the end of the story, but might be the beginning of something else. She picked up her phone. She called Elias Voss. He answered on the first ring. He was already awake. She could hear it in his voice. The particular alertness of a man who had been waiting for news. "They released my ship," she said. He was quiet for a moment. The detention order? Lifted. The tariff voided. The money returned. And they've suspended enforcement actions against independent vessels pending further review. Another pause. Longer this time. What does that mean? Pending further review? It means they're not admitting anything. It means their legal position hasn't changed. It means they can start enforcing again whenever they decide the review is over. But they're not enforcing now. They're not enforcing now. She heard him exhale. She heard, in the quality of the breath, the thing that he was not saying, the thing that she was not saying either, the thing that was sitting between them, too large to name, too important to leave unspoken. 204, she said. Yes, that's what did it. Not my challenge, not my spreadsheet. The number. 204 captains filing the same challenge, citing the same clause, saying the same thing. The system couldn't process that many. It wasn't designed for it. It was designed for one, Elias said. One captain filing one challenge, waiting 30 days for a review, paying appeal fees, running out of time, running out of money, running out of patience. That's what it was designed for. It was designed to handle one person fighting alone. She looked at the letter on her screen. The official stationery, the long title, the signature of someone she had never heard of, the words that meant nothing and everything. It's not going to stop, she said. The filings. They're going to keep coming. 204 is not the end. It's the beginning. I know. You need to keep tracking the number. Every captain who files, every vessel, every challenge. We need to know how large it gets. We need to have the number ready. Because when they come back, and they will come back, the number is going to be the only thing they can't argue with. He was quiet for a moment. She heard him typing. She heard the rhythm of his fingers on the keys, the particular cadence of a man who was making a list, adding a number to a column, letting the total grow. "I've been tracking it since the first day," he said. "Every captain I talk to, every vessel that files. I have a spreadsheet. It's not as detailed as yours, but it has the numbers, the dates, the filings, the reference numbers. Send it to me. I will. But you need to get your ship out of that dock. You have cargo. You have a delivery. The insulin." She looked at the clock on her screen. 617. The medical supplies had been in her hold for 18 days. The temperature logs were still green, but the margin was narrow. Dr. Amara Chun had called twice in the past 3 days. She had not left a message the second time. She had not needed to. "I'm leaving today," she said. "Good. Call me when you're clear." She hung up. She stood up. She looked around her cabin. The laptop, the notepad, the crate of documents she had carried to the Port Authority office 2 weeks ago, the photograph of the Meridian on her desk, the jacket without the tier hanging on the back of her chair, the coffee maker with the broken temperature gauge sitting on the narrow shelf behind her desk. She had owned it for 12 years. It was the same coffee maker she had owned on the ship before this one, the ship before the Amaranthan, the ship she had lost. She picked up the photograph. She looked at it one more time. The Meridian, the ship being towed away. She looked at it, and she thought about what she had said to Elias. The number is the only thing they can't argue with. The number was the total at the bottom of her spreadsheet. The number was the 204 challenges filed in 4 days. The number was the 22 years of Suleiman Okonkwo's records. The number was the 63 vessels she had documented. The number was growing. It would keep growing. Numbers did not stop growing once you started counting them. That was the nature of numbers. They accumulated. They compounded. They became larger than any one person could hold in their head. She put the photograph in her jacket pocket. The jacket without the tier, the one that still smelled like the ship. She put it in the pocket next to Suleiman's letter, the one she had folded carefully and kept with her for 3 days, the one that said, "I have read it now." She put them together, the photograph and the letter, the past and the present, the things she had lost and the things she had found. She walked to the cargo hold. The medical supplies were still there. 18 containers stacked in the forward section, the temperature control unit humming its low, steady hum. She checked the logs. The insulin was still within safe parameters. The margin was not wide. The temperature logs showed a slow drift upward over the past 3 days, the kind of drift that happened when a cooling system had been running for too long without maintenance. She made a note. She would need to service the unit before the return trip. She would need to get the supplies to the colony station first. That was the priority, the insulin, the people waiting, the delivery that was supposed to have happened 18 days ago. She walked to the navigation deck. She sat in the pilot's chair. The console was the same console she had been using for 3 weeks, the same screen she had been reading the framework on, the same keyboard she had been typing her challenges on, her letters, her broadcasts. She ran the pre-flight checks. The systems came online one by one. The engines cycled. The navigation systems calibrated. The life support indicators went from standby to active. The ship woke up around her, the way it always did, the way it had been waking up for 18 days, waiting for her to tell it to move. She called. Port Kavos Control. Amaranthan requesting departure clearance. A pause. She could hear the controller typing. She could hear the particular quality of the silence that meant someone was looking at her file, reading the notes, seeing the detention order that had been lifted, the tariff that had been voided, the jurisdictional challenge that was still pending, the spreadsheet that was attached to her file, the total at the bottom that Kalen Weiss had read, the number that was too large for the system to absorb. Amaranthan, you are cleared for departure. Departure Lane 3. Standard Transit Protocols. She acknowledged the clearance. She did not say thank you. She did not say anything else. She guided the ship out of the berth, slow and careful, the way you move a thing that has been still for too long. The docking clamps released. The cargo ramp, the one with the wobble in the middle step, folded into its housing. The Amaranthan slid out of the dock and into the transit lane. She looked at her navigation display. The counter she had coded 3 weeks ago was still there. It was still counting. It said 97. It had not changed since the night before. She did not know why it had stopped. She did not know if it was broken, or if the ships that had been listening had moved on, had closed their channels, had gone back to the ordinary business of running cargo and paying fees and not reading documents. She did not need the counter anymore. She had other numbers now. The number in Elias's spreadsheet. The number of captains who had filed challenges. The number at the bottom of her own spreadsheet. The one that Kalen Weiss had read. The one that was too large for the coalition to admit to. Those numbers were not on her navigation display. They were in her head. They were in the world. They were growing. She set a course for the colony station. She engaged the engines. The Amaranthan moved into open space. The transit to the colony station took 11 hours. She spent most of them on the phone. She called Dr. Amara Chun first. She told her the ship was moving. She told her the insulin was still within safe parameters. She told her she would be at the station in 11 hours. Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you." She said it the way you say something when you have been waiting for it for a very long time, and you are not sure you believed it would come. She said it the way people said things when they had been hoping and hoping some more, and were only now allowing themselves to believe. Ilara hung up. She called the next captain on her list. She called Joran Halle first. He answered on the second ring. She told him her ship was out. She told him about the suspension of enforcement actions. She told him about the letter from the Director of Coalition Administrative Operations, the one that said without prejudice, the one that said pending further review. "You think it's real?" He asked. "I think it's real for now. And when it's not real anymore?" She looked at her spreadsheet, the one she had open on her laptop, the one with the 63 vessels and the 22 years of records, and the total at the bottom that she had finally let herself look at. "Then we have the number," she said. She called the next captain. And the next? She called Suleiman Okonsho. His grandson answered. She told him to tell his grandfather that her ship was out. She told him to tell his grandfather that his challenge had been part of it, that the 204 filings had been the thing that made the system blink, that Suleiman's 22 years of records had been part of the number, that the number was the only thing they couldn't argue with. The grandson was quiet for a moment, and he said, "He knows. He's been tracking it. He has his own spreadsheet now. He makes me update it every morning." She smiled. She did not smile often. It was not a thing she did. But she smiled now, in the pilot's chair of the Amaranthan, in the middle of open space, 11 hours from a delivery that was 18 days late, with a spreadsheet open on her laptop and a number in her head that was too large for the coalition to admit to, and a photograph in her pocket of a ship she had lost 13 years ago. She smiled, and then she went back to work. She called Elias Voss last. He answered on the first ring. "I'm clear," she said. "I know. I've been watching your beacon." She looked at her navigation display. The Amaranthan's beacon was broadcasting its position, its course, its destination. Standard protocol. Nothing unusual. But someone had been watching. Someone had been tracking her. She did not know how to feel about that. She was not used to being watched. She was used to being alone. She was used to being the one who read the documents, who made the lists, who sat on the cargo hold floor at 3 o'clock in the morning and did not tell anyone what she was doing until she was sure. But she was not alone anymore. She had not been alone since she sent that first message to 47 captains. She had not been alone since Suleiman Okonkwo's grandson played her broadcast on his tablet. She had not been alone since Elias Voss held a meeting with his captains and told them that the tariffs they had been paying were not legal, that the law had been on their side the whole time, that they had just not known it. "What's the number now?" she asked. I stopped counting at 300. She closed her eyes. 300. That was not a number that could be processed quietly. That was not a number that could be ignored. That was a number that required something. A response, a decision, a change. "It's going to keep growing," she said. "I know. Are you ready for that?" He was quiet for a moment. She heard him exhale. She heard, in the quality of the breath, the thing that he was not saying, the thing that she was not saying either, the thing that was sitting between them, too large to name, too important to leave unspoken. "I've been ready for 20 years, he said. "I just didn't know it." She hung up. She set the course. She watched the stars. The colony station appeared on her screen at 1742. It was a small station, not the kind of place that drew attention. A single docking ring, a processing bay, a cluster of habitats attached to a central core. The kind of station that independent freighters served because the coalition carriers did not bother with routes that were not profitable. The kind of station that people lived on because they could not afford to live anywhere else. She called the station. A voice she did not recognize answered. She told them she had the medical supplies. She told them she was 18 days late, but the insulin was still within safe parameters. She told them she was coming in. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment. Then it said, "We've been waiting." She docked at 1755. The docking clamps grabbed the Amaranthan with a sound she had heard 1,000 times. The cargo ramp deployed, the one with the wobble in the middle step that every crew member learned to step over. She walked down the ramp. Dr. Amara Chun was waiting on the dock. She was a small woman. Her hair was gray. Her face was lined in the way that faces lined when they had been waiting for something for a long time. She was wearing a white coat that had been washed so many times it had gone soft. She was holding a datapad. She was not looking at the datapad. She was looking at the cargo containers being offloaded from the Amaranthan. She looked at Alara. She did not say thank you. She said something else. "I heard your broadcast." Alara said nothing. "I heard what you found, the section, the registration, the jurisdiction. I heard what you said about the document, about someone always reading it, about someone always finding the clause." Ilara waited. "I've been a doctor on this station for 23 years, Dr. Chun said. "I've been ordering medical supplies for 23 years. I've been watching them get delayed, watching them get seized, watching them get held up by inspections and tariffs and paperwork that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with money. I've been watching people die because the supplies didn't arrive in time. And I never knew. I never knew that the tariffs were illegal. I never knew that the inspections were without jurisdiction. I never knew that the system was designed to take from people who didn't have time to read." She stopped. She looked at the cargo containers, the insulin, the supplies that were 18 days late, the people who had been waiting. "I read it now," she said. "The section. I read it." Alara looked at her. She looked at the small woman in the warm white coat, standing on a dock at a small station that the coalition carriers did not bother to serve, waiting for supplies that were 18 days late. She looked at her, and she thought about Suleiman Okonkwo, 74 years old, reading section 2108C for the second time and understanding it. She thought about Elias Voss, holding a meeting with his captains, explaining that the law had been on their side the whole time. She thought about the counter on her navigation display, the one that had stopped at 97, the one that had counted the ships that had listened to her broadcast, the ships that had opened a channel and heard her voice and read the words she had found. She thought about the number that was still growing. The number that was not on her navigation display. The number that was in Elias's spreadsheet. The number of captains who had filed challenges. The number of people who had read the clause. The number of people who knew. "It's not going to stop," Elara said. "The filings. The challenges. The number. It's going to keep growing. It's going to keep growing until the system changes. Until they can't ignore it anymore. Until they have to admit that the law says what it says and has always said what it says, and they were the ones who weren't reading it." Dr. Chun looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded. She did not say anything else. She turned and walked toward the cargo containers, her data pad in her hand, her white coat soft with washing, her station small and remote and not profitable enough for the coalition carriers to bother with. She walked toward the supplies that were 18 days late, and the people who were waiting, and the work that did not stop, that never stopped, that never stopped, that would go on whether the system changed or not. Elara watched her go. Then she walked back up the ramp. The one with the wobble in the middle step. She stepped over it. She went to her cabin. She sat at her desk. She opened her laptop. The spreadsheet was still there. The one with the 63 vessels and the 22 years of records and the total at the bottom that she had finally let herself look at. The total was not the only number anymore. There was another number now. The number in Elias's spreadsheet. The number of captains who had filed challenges. 300. 300 captains who had read Section 2108C and checked their registrations and done the math. 300 captains who knew. She looked at the photograph on her desk. The Meridian. She had taken it out of her pocket when she sat down. She had propped it against her laptop screen again, the way she had propped it in the dock, the way she had propped it when she was waiting for the letter that came at 0600, the letter that said her ship was released, the letter that said enforcement actions were suspended pending further review. The photograph was old. The paper was soft. The image was grainy. But the name was still visible across the bow. The Meridian. The ship she had lost. The ship she had not been able to save. She looked at the photograph. She looked at the spreadsheet. She looked at the number that was growing, the number that was not on her navigation display, the number that was in the world now, the number that could not be unmade. She opened the new document. She started writing. She wrote a letter to every captain who had filed the challenge. She told them her ship was out. She told them about the suspension of enforcement actions. She told them that the coalition had blinked, but that it was not the end, that the suspension was temporary, that the coalition would come back when they figured out how to fight differently. She told them that the only thing that would keep them safe was the number of captains who knew, the number of challenges filed, the number of people who had read the clause and would not unread it. She wrote, keep filing, keep counting, keep the number growing. The system was designed to handle one person fighting alone. It was not designed to handle 300. It was not designed to handle 1,000. It was not designed to handle a number that keeps growing. We are the number now. We are the thing the system was not designed for. We are the clause that someone planted 43 years ago and hoped someone would find. We are the people who read the document. She read the letter twice. She made one small change. She sent it to Elias Voss. She asked him to forward it to every captain in his spreadsheet. Then she closed her laptop. She made coffee. She stood at the galley window and looked out at the station. The colony station was small. It was not the kind of station that drew attention. But it was a station. People lived there. People worked there. People waited for supplies that were 18 days late and thanked the captain who brought them and went back to work. People read documents. People found clauses. People learned that the law had been on their side the whole time, and they had just not known it. She finished her coffee. She went to her cabin. She lay down on her bunk. She closed her eyes. She slept for 6 hours. She did not dream. She woke to the sound of her phone. It was 0300 station time. The cabin was dark. The Amaranthin was still docked at the colony station, its systems on standby, its cargo hold empty for the first time in 19 days. The insulin was delivered. The people were waiting. The work was done. She had been asleep for 6 hours. She had not meant to sleep that long. She had not meant to sleep at all. She reached for the phone. The screen was lit with a name she did not recognize. The call was from a Coalition Administrative Exchange. She answered. Captain Venn? The voice was not Kalen Weiss. It was not Varen Thorne. It was someone else. A woman. Her voice was professional, controlled. The voice of someone who had been trained to deliver information without inflection, without emotion, without anything that could be interpreted as an opinion. This is Administrator Soraya Halil from the Coalition Arbitration Office. I'm calling to inform you that the jurisdictional challenges filed by you and other parties have been consolidated into a single arbitration proceeding. The hearing is scheduled for 10 days from today. You are required to appear. Elara sat up. Her head was still heavy with sleep. Her mouth was dry. The words were not making sense the way they should. She repeated them in her head. Consolidated. Arbitration. Hearing. Required to appear. I'm not a lawyer, she said. Her voice came out rougher than she intended. She had not spoken to anyone in 6 hours. She had not spoken to anyone since Dr. Chun on the dock, since she had watched the medical supplies being unloaded, since she had walked back up the ramp and stepped over the wobble in the middle step and gone to her cabin and closed her eyes. Under the Consolidated Port Authority Governance Framework, parties to a jurisdictional dispute may represent themselves in arbitration proceedings. You are not required to retain counsel. I have 63 vessels in my filing, 22 years of records. A spreadsheet that's... I'm aware of your spreadsheet, Captain. The words hung in the air. Elara felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, something else. The recognition that she had been seen, that the work she had done, the numbers she had collected, the documents she had read, the clause she had found, it was not private anymore. It was in the world. It was in the Coalition Arbitration Office. It was in the hands of an administrator who was calling her at 0300 to tell her that she had 10 days to prepare for a hearing that would decide everything. Who else is on the filing? She asked. The consolidated challenges. Who else is listed? Administrator Halil was quiet for a moment. Elara heard her typing. She heard the particular rhythm of someone scrolling through a document, reading names, counting. Your filing represents 63 vessels. The VAS Cooperative filing represents 37 vessels. There are 219 individual filings from independent captains. There is one filing from a retired captain named Suleiman Okonkwo. There is one filing from a medical doctor named Amara Chun on behalf of the Halo Colony Station. The total number of vessels represented in the consolidated proceeding is 321. Elara closed her eyes. 321. That was not the number in Elias's spreadsheet. That was larger. That was the number that had been growing while she was sleeping, while she was delivering her cargo, while she was standing on the dock at a small colony station watching a woman in a worn white coat receive supplies that were 18 days late. The number had grown. It had kept growing. It had not stopped. The hearing will be held at Coalition Central. You will be provided with the location and schedule. You may bring documentation. You may bring witnesses. You may bring whatever materials you believe are relevant to your claim. My claim is simple, Elara said. Section 2108C says the Inspectorate has jurisdiction only over vessels registered in Coalition member states. The 321 vessels in the consolidated filing are not registered in Coalition member states. Every tariff, every seizure, every fee collected from those vessels over the past 22 years was collected without jurisdiction. I have the records. I have the numbers. I have the clause. Administrator Halil was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You will have the opportunity to present your argument at the hearing, Captain. I am not the arbiter. I am only the administrator. I am calling to inform you of the schedule. The rest is not my role." She gave Ilara the date, the time, the location. She gave her a reference number for the consolidated proceeding. She gave her the name of the arbiter, a Velhari named Arbitrator Thola. Ilara had never heard of her. She wrote the name down anyway. She wrote it in her notepad on a fresh page at the top. Below it, she wrote the date. Below that, she wrote 321 vessels. 22 years, 1 clause. Will there be anything else, Captain? Ilara looked at her notepad. She looked at the numbers. 321, 22, 1. The numbers were small on the page. They were small in her head. They were small compared to the thing they represented. 22 years of work and waiting and loss. 321 vessels that had been paying for something they should not have had to pay for. 1 clause in a document that no one had read all the way through. "No," she said, "that's everything." She hung up. She sat in the dark. Her phone was on the bunk beside her. Her notepad was in her hands. The numbers were on the page. She looked at them for a long time. Then she reached for her laptop. She called Elias Voss at 0400. He answered on the first ring. She had not expected him to be awake. But he was awake. He was always awake. He was the kind of man who did not sleep when there was work to do, and there was always work to do. They consolidated the filings, she said. 321 vessels. Arbitration in 10 days. He was quiet for a moment. She heard him typing. She heard the particular rhythm of someone adding a number to a spreadsheet, updating a total, letting the number grow. 321, he said. "That's not what I had. I had 312. There were 9 I didn't know about. They filed while I was in transit, while I was delivering the cargo, while I was sleeping. 9 captains who didn't call me. 9 captains who filed on their own." She heard something in his voice. Not disappointment. Something else. The recognition that the thing they had started was no longer theirs. It had grown beyond them. It had become something that did not need them to call, to organize, to explain. It had become something that moved on its own. "You're going to need to testify," she said. "Your cooperative. Your 37 vessels. Your records. You're going to need to stand in front of Arbitrator Thola and tell her what they took from you. I know. Are you ready?" He was quiet for a moment. She heard him exhale. She heard the particular quality of the breath that meant he was thinking about something, weighing it, deciding how much to say. "I've been keeping records for 20 years, he said. "Not the way you keep records. Not the way Suleiman Okonkwo keeps records. I don't have a folder of yellowed paper. I don't have a spreadsheet with interest calculations. I have a number in my head. A number I've been carrying for 20 years. Every tariff. Every seizure. Every fee. Every time they took something from me and I paid it, because it was easier than fighting. I've been carrying that number for 20 years. I've never written it down. I've never told anyone, but I've been carrying it." She waited. "It's not as large as yours," he said. "The number in your spreadsheet, the one you attached to the letter you deleted. It's not as large as that, but it's mine. It's the number I've been carrying. And I'm going to stand in front of this arbitrator, and I'm going to tell her what it is. I'm going to tell her what it represents. And I'm going to tell her that I've been carrying it for 20 years, and I'm tired of carrying it." She closed her eyes. She saw him. Not the man she had spoken to on the phone a dozen times in the past weeks. Not the careful, methodical captain who kept his insurance premiums paid 6 months in advance. She saw the man who had been carrying a number in his head for 20 years. The man who had not written it down, had not told anyone, had not let it be anything more than a weight he carried alone. "You're not carrying it alone anymore," she said. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I know." She hung up. She called the next person on her list. She called Suleiman Okonkwo at 0500. His grandson answered. She told him about the arbitration. She told him about the consolidated filing. She told him that his name was on the list, that his 22 years of records were part of the number, that the arbitrator would see them, would read them, would know. The grandson was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He's been waiting for this." "I know. He's been waiting for 22 years. He didn't know what he was waiting for. He just knew he was waiting. He kept the records because he thought maybe someday someone would need them. He didn't know who. He didn't know when. He just knew that someone would need them someday." She looked at the photograph on her desk, the Meridian, propped against her laptop screen. She had been carrying it for 13 years. She had not known what she was carrying it for. She had just known that she needed to carry it. "Tell him I'm going to need him to testify," she said. "Tell him I'm going to need him to stand in front of Arbitrator Thola and tell her about the 22 years. Tell her about the records. Tell her about the number he's been carrying." The grandson was quiet again. She heard him turn away from the phone. She heard him speak to someone. She heard the low murmur of voices, the particular cadence of a conversation between two people who had been talking to each other for a very long time, who did not need to say much to understand each other. "He came back on the line. He says he'll be there. He says he's been waiting to be there for 22 years. He says he's not going to miss it." She smiled. He smiled. She did not smile often, but she smiled now. She smiled because Suleiman Okonkwo, 74 years old, who ran a single freighter on a route that kept him in the outer sectors, who had been saving his records for 22 years in a folder of yellowed paper, who had never filed a challenge, never contested a tariff, never fought back because it was easier not to. Suleiman Okonkwo was going to stand in front of an arbitrator and tell her the number he had been carrying for 22 years. She hung up. She called the next person on her list. She called Dr. Amara Chun at 0600. The doctor answered on the fourth ring. Her voice was thick with sleep. Alara had not thought about the time difference. She had not thought about anything except the list, the names, the numbers, the 10 days she had to prepare for a hearing that would decide everything. "Captain Venn, the challenges have been consolidated. There's going to be an arbitration hearing in 10 days. Your name is on the filing. The filing you made on behalf of Halo Colony Station." A pause. "I didn't make a filing. Someone did. Someone filed a challenge in your name. On behalf of the station. On behalf of the people waiting for medical supplies that were 18 days late." Another pause, longer this time. Alara heard the doctor breathing. She heard the particular quality of the silence that meant she was thinking, remembering, putting pieces together. "My assistant," Dr. Chun said. "Her name is Lin. She's young. She's good with computers. She heard your broadcast. She told me about it. She told me about the clause. She told me about the registration. She told me that the tariffs we've been paying for medical supplies for 23 years, she told me they were illegal. She was very excited. I told her to calm down. I told her that things were more complicated than they seemed. I told her that you can't just—" She stopped. "She filed it anyway," Alara said. "She filed it anyway. She used my name. She used the station's name. She used the records from the past 3 years. The supply orders, the delays, the tariffs, the inspections, the seizures. She put them all in a spreadsheet. She attached it to the filing. She didn't tell me until after she did it." Alara looked at her own spreadsheet, the one with the 63 vessels and the 22 years of records, the one that Kalen Weiss had read, the one that had been flagged by a coalition backup server, the one that had been sent to the arbitration office, the one that was part of the consolidated filing now. She thought about the young assistant Lin, who had heard her broadcast and filed a challenge without telling anyone. She thought about the 9 captains who had filed on their own, who had not called Elias, who had not been on his list. She thought about the number that had grown while she was sleeping, the number that had not stopped growing. She was right, Ilara said. Things are not more complicated than they seem. They're simpler. There's a clause in the framework. It says what it says. The Inspectorate has jurisdiction only over vessels registered in coalition member states. Halo Colony Station is not a vessel, but the principle is the same. The supplies that come to your station travel on independent vessels. The tariffs they charge are illegal. The inspections are illegal. The seizures are illegal. The delays are illegal. Everything they've been doing for 23 years is illegal. Dr. Chun was quiet for a long time. Ilara heard her breathing. She heard the particular quality of the silence that meant she was not going to argue, was not going to say that things were complicated, was not going to tell her assistant to calm down. "I'll be there," Dr. Chun said. "At the hearing, I'll be there. I'll tell them about the 23 years. I'll tell them about the supplies that didn't arrive. I'll tell them about the people who died because the insulin was late, because the vaccines were held up, because the antibiotics were seized. I'll tell them about the number I've been carrying, the number I've never written down, the number I've been carrying for 23 years. Ilara closed her eyes. She saw the doctor in her worn white coat, standing on the dock, watching the cargo containers being offloaded. She saw the number she had been carrying for 23 years. The number of people who had died because the supplies were late. The number that was not in any spreadsheet. The number that was not on any filing. The number that was the reason she had read the document in the first place. "You're not carrying it alone anymore," Ilara said. Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know." She hung up. The 10 days passed like water through a sieve. Ilara spent them preparing. She did not sleep much. She did not eat much. She sat at her desk in her cabin on the Amaranthan, and she went through her spreadsheet line by line, vessel by vessel, year by year. She verified every number. She checked every calculation. She read section 2108C so many times that she could recite it from memory, could see it on the page when she closed her eyes, could hear it in her head when she was doing something else, when she was making coffee, when she was standing at the galley window, when she was lying in her bunk at night trying to sleep. She called Elias every day. He sent her updates. The number was still growing. Not the number in the consolidated filing. That number was fixed. 321 vessels. That was the number that would go to arbitration. But there were other numbers now. Numbers of captains who had filed challenges after the consolidation deadline. Numbers of vessels that were preparing to file if the arbitration went the wrong way. Numbers of people who had read the clause and would not unread it, who had done the math and would not undo it, who had learned that the law was on their side and would not unlearn it. She called Suleiman Okonkwo once. She did not speak to him directly. She spoke to his grandson. She asked if Suleiman was ready. The grandson said he was. He said Suleiman had been going through his records, the yellowed folder, the handwritten pages, the 22 years of tariffs and seizures and fees. He said Suleiman had been looking at them for hours, reading them, touching them, holding them in his hands. He said Suleiman had told him that he had not looked at the records in years. He had kept them, but he had not looked at them. He had not wanted to look at them, but now he was looking at them. Now he was reading them. Now he was remembering. She called Dr. Chun once. The doctor said she was ready. She said Lin, her assistant, had helped her prepare. Lin had put the station's records into a spreadsheet. Line had calculated the number of supply delays, the number of inspections, the number of seizures, the number of times the coalition had taken something that was supposed to go to the station. That was supposed to keep people alive. Lin had calculated the number. It was larger than Dr. Chun had thought. It was larger than she had let herself think. But now she knew it. Now she was carrying it. Now she was going to tell it to the arbitrator. She called the other captains. Not all of them. There were too many. 321 vessels. She could not call all of them. She did not need to call all of them. They were calling each other. They were organizing. They were preparing. They were reading the clause. They were doing the math. They were getting ready to stand in front of Arbitrator Thola and tell her the numbers they had been carrying, some for a few years, some for decades, some for their entire careers. She did not call Kalen Weiss. She did not call Varen Thorne. She did not call the Director of Coalition Administrative Operations. She did not call anyone at the Coalition. She did not need to. They knew what she was doing. They had her spreadsheet. They had the consolidated filing. They had the names of 321 vessels and the records of 22 years, and the number at the bottom that was too large for the system to absorb. They knew. They had always known. They had just been counting on no one reading the document. Someone had read it. The morning of the hearing, she woke at 04:00. She did not need to set an alarm. She had not been sleeping anyway. She lay in her bunk for a few minutes, looking at the ceiling of her cabin, listening to the sounds of the Amaranthan. The ship was still docked at the colony station. She had not moved it in 10 days. She had not needed to move it. She had been preparing. She had been reading. She had been making lists. The work was done now. The lists were made. The numbers were calculated. The clause was memorized. There was nothing left to prepare. She got up. She showered. She dressed. She put on the jacket without the tear, the one that still smelled like the ship. She put the photograph of the Meridian in her pocket. She put Suleiman's letter in her other pocket. She put her notepad in her jacket pocket, the one with the numbers written on the first page, the date, the time, the name of the arbitrator. She picked up her laptop. She walked out of her cabin, down the corridor, down the cargo ramp. She stepped over the wobble in the middle step. She walked across the dock to the transit hub. She took a transport to Coalition Central. The transport was crowded. She found a seat in the back. She put her laptop on her knees. She did not open it. She looked out the window. The station was large. The transport moved through corridors that were wider than anything at Port Corvas, wider than anything at Halo Colony Station, wider than anything she had seen in years. The corridors were lined with administrative offices, with legal chambers, with the machinery of a system that had been running for decades, that had been designed to process complaints, to deny appeals, to absorb challenges, to continue operating regardless of what anyone said or did or found in a document that no one had read. She got off the transport. She walked through the corridors. She found the arbitration chamber. It was a large room. It was designed to hold a delegation. There were seats for representatives. There was a table for the claimant. There was a table for the respondent. There was a raised platform for the arbitrator. The room was designed for formality. It was designed for procedure. It was designed for the kind of legal proceeding that happened when a party challenged something, and the system absorbed the challenge and continued operating. Alara walked to the claimant's table. She set her laptop down. She set her notepad down. She set her jacket on the back of her chair. She sat down. She waited. The room filled slowly. Elias Voss came in first. He was wearing a jacket that looked like it had been pressed for the occasion. He sat beside her. He did not say anything. He did not need to. He was there. That was enough. Suleiman Okonkwo came in next. He was old. He walked slowly. He was leaning on his grandson's arm. He was carrying a folder. The folder was thick. It was yellowed. It was the folder he had been keeping for 22 years. He sat on the other side of Alara. He put the folder on the table. He put his hands on top of it. His hands were old. They were the hands of a man who had worked for 52 years. They were calloused. They were scarred. They were steady. He did not say anything. He did not need to. He was there. That was enough. Dr. Amara Chun came in next. She was wearing her white coat, the one that had been washed so many times it had gone soft. She was carrying a data pad. She sat behind Ilara. She did not say anything. She did not need to. She was there. That was enough. The other captains came in. Some Ilara knew. Most she did not. They filled the seats behind her. They were not wearing suits. They were not wearing uniforms. They were wearing the clothes they wore when they worked. Jackets with tears, boots that had been resoled, shirts that had been washed too many times. They were working people. They were the people who moved cargo through the sector, who paid the tariffs, who endured the inspections, who lost the seizures, who filed the appeals, who lost the appeals, who kept working because that was what they did. They were the people who had been carrying numbers in their heads for years, for decades, for their entire careers. They were the people who had read the clause. They were the people who knew. The coalition's table filled last. There were 9 people, lawyers, administrators, legal advisors. Kaylin Weiss was there. She was sitting at the far end of the table. She was not looking at Ilara. She was looking at her notes. She was looking at her laptop. She was looking at anything except the 321 captains sitting in the seats behind Ilara, the captains who had read the clause, who had done the math, who had come to tell the arbitrator the numbers they had been carrying. Arbitrator Thala entered at 090. She was Velhari. She was old. She had been doing this work for longer than Ilara had been alive. She moved slowly. She arranged her documents carefully. She looked at the room. She looked at the claimant's table, at Ilara, at Elias, at Suleiman, at the folder of yellowed paper, at the data pad, at the laptop. She looked at the seats behind Ilara, at the captains filling them, at the jackets and the boots and the shirts that had been washed too many times. She looked at the coalition's table, at the 9 people in their formal clothes, at their laptops and their notes and their legal citations. She looked at the room. She looked at the clause that someone had planted 43 years ago and hoped someone would find. She opened the proceeding. This session convenes under the Consolidated Port Authority Governance Framework to address the consolidated jurisdictional dispute filed by Captain Ilara Venn and 321 other parties. The claimant may present her case. Ilara stood up. She did not have notes. She did not have a prepared statement. She had the clause. She had the numbers. She had the people behind her. She had the folder of yellowed paper on the table beside her. She had the photograph in her pocket. She had the letter from Suleiman in her other pocket. She had the numbers she had been carrying for 28 years. She opened her laptop. She pulled up section 2108, C. She read it aloud. She read it the way she had read it on the floor of her cargo hole at 3 o'clock in the morning. Slowly, carefully, the way you read something when you need it to be understood. The Port Authority Inspectorate has enforcement authority only over vessels registered in coalition member states. She looked up. She looked at Arbitrator Thola. She looked at the coalition's table. She looked at Kaylin Weiss, who was not looking at her notes anymore, who was looking at her, who was listening. My vessel, the Amaranthin, is not registered in a coalition member state. The 321 vessels represented in this consolidated filing are not registered in coalition member states. They have never been registered in coalition member states. The Inspectorate has been enforcing tariffs, conducting inspections, and seizing cargo from these vessels for 22 years. Every enforcement action taken against them has been taken without jurisdiction. Every tariff collected from them has been collected without legal authority. Every seizure, every fee, every inspection charge, every day of detention, all of it unlawful. I have the records. I have the numbers. I have the clause. She stopped. The room was quiet. She looked at the people behind her. Elias, Suleiman, Dr. Chun, the captains. The people who had read the clause. The people who had done the math. The people who had come to tell the arbitrator the numbers they had been carrying. She turned back to Arbitrator Thola. "I have witnesses," she said. "They have numbers to share. Numbers they've been carrying for a long time. I would like to call my first witness." Arbitrator Thola nodded. Alara looked at Suleiman Okonkwo. He was old. He was leaning on his grandson's arm. He was holding the folder of yellowed paper. He was holding the records he had been keeping for 22 years. He was holding the number he had been carrying. She said, "Suleiman Okonkwo, will you please tell the arbitrator what they took from you?" He stood up. He walked to the front of the room. He walked slowly. He walked the way a man walks when he has been waiting for something for a very long time, and it is finally time to do it. He put the folder on the table. He opened it. He put his hands on the pages. His hands were old. They were steady. He began to speak. Suleiman Okonkwo spoke for 47 minutes. He did not speak like a lawyer. He did not speak like a witness in a formal proceeding. He spoke like a man who had been working for 52 years and was tired and wanted someone to understand. He spoke slowly. He spoke carefully. He spoke the way you speak when you are telling a story that you have been holding inside you for a very long time, and you want to get it right. He started at the beginning. He started with the Kano trader, the freighter he had bought when he was 22 years old, the freighter he had been running for 52 years, the freighter that was older than most of the people in the room. He talked about the early years, before the coalition, when there were no tariffs, no inspections, no fees. He talked about the routes he ran, the cargo he carried, the people he worked with. He talked about the way things were before the system grew up around them, before the document was written, before the clause was buried. Then he talked about the first time the coalition came to his ship. He talked about the inspection that took 3 hours, the tariff that was assessed, the fee that he paid because he did not know he could refuse. He talked about the second time, and the third, and the fourth. He talked about the way the inspections got longer, the tariffs got larger, the fees got more frequent. He talked about the way the system grew around him, around his ship, around his work, until he could not remember what it was like to move cargo without being stopped, without being charged, without being told that what he was carrying was subject to review, to assessment, to seizure. He talked about the seizures. He talked about the cargo that was taken, the shipments that never arrived, the contracts that were broken, the money that was lost. He talked about the appeals he did not file because the fees were too high, because the process was too long, because he was tired and he had work to do and he could not afford to stop. He talked about the folder he started, the one with the yellowed pages, the one where he kept the records because he thought maybe someday someone would need them. He talked about 22 years. He talked about the number he had been carrying. He talked about the total at the bottom of the folder, the total he had calculated in the weeks since he heard Alara's broadcast, the total that represented everything they had taken from him. He read the number aloud. He read it slowly. He read it the way you read something that you have been holding inside you for 22 years, and you are finally letting go. The room was quiet. The arbitrator did not interrupt. The coalition lawyers did not object. The captains in the seats behind Alara did not move. They listened. They listened to the number. They listened to the story. They listened to the man who had been carrying it for 22 years. When he finished, he sat down. He put his hands on the folder. He closed it. He looked at Alara. He did not say anything. He did not need to. He had said what he came to say. He had told the arbitrator the number. He had let it go. Elias Voss spoke next. He spoke for 30 minutes. He did not speak about the early years. He spoke about the later years. He spoke about the cooperative he built, the 37 vessels, the 41 captains. He spoke about the meetings he held, the records he kept, the numbers he carried. He spoke about the way he had been carrying a number in his head for 20 years, the number he had never written down, the number he had never told anyone. He spoke about the weight of it. He spoke about the way it sat in his chest, the way it woke him up at night, the way it followed him through every dock, every inspection, every seizure. He read the number aloud. He read it the way you read something that you have been carrying for 20 years, and you are finally putting down. His voice did not waver. His hands did not shake. He had been waiting to say this number for 20 years. He was not going to rush it. He was not going to apologize for it. He was going to say it and let it be in the room, and let the room hold it. When he finished, he sat down. He looked at Ilara. He nodded once. She nodded back. Dr. Amara Chun spoke next. She spoke for 20 minutes. She did not speak about tariffs or seizures or jurisdictional clauses. She spoke about the station. She spoke about the people who lived there, the people she had been treating for 23 years. She spoke about the supplies that did not arrive, the insulin that was late, the vaccines that were held up, the antibiotics that were seized. She spoke about the people who died because the supplies did not come in time. She spoke about the number she had been carrying, the number she had never written down, the number Lynn, her assistant, had put into a spreadsheet, the number she had let herself look at for the first time in 23 years. She read the number aloud. She read it slowly. Her voice broke once at the beginning. She stopped. She took a breath. She started again. She read the number. She read it the way you read something that you have been carrying for 23 years, and you are finally naming. When she finished, she sat down. She put her data pad on the table. She put her hands in her lap. She looked at Elara. She did not say anything. She did not need to. She had said what she came to say. She had told the arbitrator the number. She had let it go. Elara called other witnesses. She called captains she knew. She called captains she did not know. She called the ones who had been carrying numbers for a few years, and the ones who had been carrying numbers for decades, and the ones who had only just learned that they had been carrying numbers at all. They stood in front of Arbitrator Thola, one after another, and they told her what the coalition had taken from them. They told her about the inspections and the tariffs and the seizures and the fees. They told her about the appeals they did not file because the fees were too high, because the process was too long, because they were tired and they had work to do and they could not afford to stop. They told her about the numbers they had been carrying. They read the numbers aloud. They put them into the record. The coalition lawyers objected at various points. They raised procedural challenges. They raised questions of standing. They raised arguments about the statute of limitations, about administrative precedent, about the doctrine of customary authority. Arbitrator Thola listened to each objection. She noted each objection. She overruled each objection. She let the witnesses speak. She let the numbers go into the record. She let the room hold them. The hearing lasted 3 days. On the 3rd day, Alara called her final witness. She called herself. She stood at the front of the room. She did not have notes. She did not have a folder of yellowed paper. She did not have a spreadsheet open on her laptop. She had the clause. She had the numbers. She had the photograph in her pocket. She had the letter from Suleiman in her other pocket. She had the numbers she had been carrying for 28 years. She started at the beginning. She started with the Meridian. She started with the first ship she had owned, the ship she had lost 13 years ago. She talked about the way she had watched it being towed away, the way she had stood on the dock and held herself still until she was out of scanner range. She talked about the number she had been carrying since that day, the number she had never written down, the number she had put on her wall in a photograph and looked at without seeing for 13 years. She talked about the Amaranthan. She talked about the 19 days of detention, the medical supplies, the insulin that was 18 days late, the colony station waiting. She talked about the documents she had started reading on the floor of her cargo hold, the 3,892 pages, the 10 days of reading, the way she had read each section twice, the way she had looked for the spaces between the words. She talked about the moment she found section 2108, C. She talked about the way she had read it 3 times, the way she had checked her registration, the way she had sat in the dark and let the number form in her head. She talked about the spreadsheet. She talked about the 63 vessels she had documented, the 22 years of records, the total at the bottom that she had not let herself look at for more than a few seconds at a time. She talked about the way the number had grown, the way it had become something larger than her, the way it had moved beyond her, the way it had become 321 vessels and a folder of yellowed paper and a data pad and a number in Elias's head and a number in Suleiman's folder and a number in Dr. Chon's spreadsheet and a number that was too large for the system to absorb. She talked about the clause. She talked about the people who had written it in 2187, the 9 delegations who had sat in a room and negotiated every line, the human delegates who had planted it there, who had buried it in the document, who had hoped that someday someone would find it. She talked about the 43 years the clause had sat in the framework, unread, unamended, unchanged. She talked about the way it had waited, the way it had been patient, the way it had been ready. She read the clause aloud one more time. She read it the way she had read it on the floor of her cargo hold at 3 o'clock in the morning, slowly, carefully, the way you read something when you need it to be understood. The Port Authority Inspectorate has enforcement authority only over vessels registered in coalition member states. She looked at Arbitrator Thola. She looked at the coalition's table. She looked at Kalen Weiss, who was not looking at her notes, who was looking at her, who was listening. She looked at the captains behind her, Elias, Suleiman, Dr. Chun, the ones she knew, the ones she did not know, the ones who had read the clause, the ones who had done the math, the ones who had come to tell the arbitrator the numbers they had been carrying. She said, "That's the number. That's the only number that matters. Not the total in my spreadsheet. Not the 22 years of records. Not the 321 vessels. Those are all numbers that came after. The number that matters is the one in the clause. The one that has been in the framework for 43 years. The one that says the inspectorate has jurisdiction only over vessels registered in coalition member states. That's the number. That's the thing that was written. That's the thing that was waiting. That's the thing that is still there. It has always been there. It has not changed. It has not been amended. It has not been repealed. It has not been overruled. It is still in the framework. It still says what it says. It has been waiting for someone to read it. Someone read it, and now we are here." She stopped. She did not have anything else to say. She had said what she came to say. She had told the arbitrator the number. She had let it go. She sat down. The coalition presented its case on the 4th day. They brought their own witnesses. They brought their own records. They brought legal arguments and administrative precedents and the doctrine of customary authority and the 4 cases where the coalition courts had ruled around Section 2108C without addressing it. They argued that the clause had been superseded by later amendments. They argued that the doctrine of successor jurisdiction gave the inspectorate authority over all vessels in coalition space, regardless of registration. They argued that the captains had waited too long, that the statute of limitations had run, that the claims were barred by administrative precedent, that the system had been operating in this way for decades, and that the stability of the system required that it continue to operate in this way. Ilara listened. She listened the way she had listened to the witnesses who had stood in front of Arbitrator Thola and told her the numbers they had been carrying. She listened for the spaces between the words. The spaces were there. They were always there. The coalition's lawyers argued around the clause. They did not argue against it. They did not say it meant something other than what it said. They argued that it did not matter, that other things had happened after it was written, that the system had grown, that the way things were done had changed, that the clause was old, and the system was new, and the new system had its own rules and its own precedents, and its own way of doing things. They did not say the clause was wrong. They said it was old. They said it was irrelevant. They said it did not matter. Arbitrator Thola listened. She did not interrupt. She did not object. She noted the arguments. She noted the precedents. She noted the citations. She let them put their case into the record. She let the room hold it. On the fifth day, Arbitrator Thola delivered her ruling. She read it aloud. She read it the way Alara had read. Section 2108C, on the floor of her cargo hold. Slowly, carefully, the way you read something when you need it to be understood. She started with the clause. She cited Section 2108C in full. She noted that it had not been amended. It had not been repealed. It had not been overruled. It was still in the framework. It still said what it said. She addressed the coalition's arguments. She noted that later amendments had expanded the enforcement authority of other agencies, but that none of those amendments had amended Section 2108C. The Inspectorate was not the Tariff Enforcement Bureau. It was not the Cargo Inspection Service. It was not the Licensing Review Board. It was the Inspectorate. And the Inspectorate's authority was defined by Section 2108C. And Section 2108C said what it said. She addressed the doctrine of customary authority. She noted that the coalition had been enforcing tariffs against independent vessels for decades. She noted that this had become the customary practice. She noted that customary practice did not amend the framework. The framework was the document. The document said what it said. Customary practice could not change that. The clause was still there. It had always been there. It had been waiting. She addressed the statute of limitations. She noted that the coalition's own administrative code provided that claims of unlawful enforcement could be filed at any time without limitation when the enforcement action was taken without jurisdiction. She noted that the Inspectorate had been acting without jurisdiction for 22 years. She noted that the claims were not barred. She addressed the stability of the system. She noted that the system had been operating in a certain way for decades. She noted that changing the system would be difficult. She noted that the difficulty of change did not make the law something other than what it was. The law was the law. The framework was the framework. The clause was the clause. It had been there for 43 years. It had been waiting. It was not going to wait anymore. She ruled. She ruled that Section 2108C meant what it said. She ruled that the Port Authority Inspectorate had jurisdiction only over vessels registered in coalition member states. She ruled that the 321 vessels represented in the consolidated filing were not registered in coalition member states. She ruled that every enforcement action taken against those vessels by the Inspectorate was taken without jurisdiction. She ruled that the tariffs were unlawful. The seizures were unlawful. The fees were unlawful. The inspections were unlawful. The detentions were unlawful. All of it, 22 years of it, unlawful. She ruled that the coalition was required to return everything that had been taken. Every tariff, every fee, every seized cargo, every credit collected under unlawful authority, with interest, at the statutory rate, calculated from the date of each collection. She ruled that the coalition was required to issue a formal acknowledgment that Section 2108C meant what it said, and that the Inspectorate's jurisdiction was limited accordingly. She ruled that the suspension of enforcement actions against independent vessels was no longer a suspension. It was the law. The law had always been the law. The law was not going to change. The law was going to be enforced. She finished reading. She looked at the room. She looked at the coalition's table. She looked at the captains in the seats behind Ilara. She looked at Alara. She did not say anything else. She closed her folder. She stood up. She left the room. The room was quiet. The captains did not move. The coalition lawyers did not move. Kaylin Weiss was sitting at the far end of the coalition's table. She was not looking at her notes. She was not looking at her laptop. She was looking at Alara. Her expression was not angry. It was not defeated. It was something else. The look of a person who had been given a problem that was larger than she had realized, larger than she had been told, larger than she had prepared for. The look of a person who is going to have to go back to her office and figure out how to do something that had never been done before. She stood up. She gathered her documents. She left the room. The other lawyers followed her. The room emptied. Alara sat at the claimant's table. She did not move. She did not speak. She sat with her hands in her lap. The laptop was closed. The notepad was closed. The photograph was in her pocket. The letter from Suleiman was in her other pocket. The room was empty now. The captains had left. Elias had left. Suleiman had left, leaning on his grandson's arm, carrying his folder of yellowed paper, carrying the number he had let go. Dr. Chun had left, her data pad in her hand, her white coat soft with washing, the number she had carried for 23 years finally named. Alara sat alone. She sat in the room where the arbitrator had ruled that the clause meant what it said. She sat in the room where 22 years of unlawful enforcement had been declared unlawful. She sat in the room where the number she had been carrying for 28 years had been let go. She did not know how long she sat there. The room was quiet. The lights were the pale blue of station day cycle, steady and even, the kind of lights that did not change, that did not need to change, that would stay the same whether anyone was in the room or not. She sat in the light and she did not move. She thought about the Meridian. She thought about the ship she had lost 13 years ago. She thought about the way she had watched it being towed away, the way she had stood on the dock and held herself still until she was out of scanner range. She thought about the photograph she had put on her wall, the one she had looked at without seeing for 13 years. She thought about the number she had been carrying since that day, the number that was not in any spreadsheet, the number that was not on any filing, the number that was the reason she had read the document in the first place. She reached into her pocket. She took out the photograph. She looked at it, the Meridian, the small freighter being towed out of port. The image was grainy. The paper was soft. The edges were worn. She had been carrying it for 13 years. She had been carrying it since the day she lost the ship. She had been carrying it without knowing what she was carrying it for. She had been carrying it because she needed something to remind her. She had been carrying it because she could not let it go. She looked at it now. She looked at it the way you look at something that you have been carrying for so long that you have forgotten it is there. You look at it, and you remember why you started carrying it in the first place. You look at it, and you understand that you do not need to carry it anymore. You have put it down. You have let it go. The number is in the world now. The clause is in the world now. The law is in the world now. It has always been in the world. It was just waiting for someone to read it. She put the photograph on the table. She left it there. She did not need to carry it anymore. She stood up. She picked up her laptop. She picked up her notepad. She walked out of the room. She took the transport back to the colony station. The transport was crowded. She found a seat in the back. She put her laptop on her knees. She looked out the window. The corridors of Coalition Central slid past, the administrative offices, the legal chambers, the machinery of a system that had been running for decades, that had been designed to process complaints, to deny appeals, to absorb challenges, to continue operating regardless of what anyone said or did or found in a document that no one had read. The system was still there. It was not going anywhere. The offices were still there. The chambers were still there. The machinery was still there. But something had changed. The clause was in the record now. The ruling was in the record now. The number was in the record now. The system could not unread it. The system could not unsee it. The system could not go back to the way it was before someone read the document. She got off the transport. She walked through the corridors. She walked to the dock. The Amaranthin was still there. The cargo ramp was down. The wobble was in the middle step. The ship was the same ship it had always been. Scarred. Tired. Still. It had been sitting in this dock for 10 days, waiting for her to come back. She walked up the ramp. She stepped over the wobble. She walked to her cabin. She sat at her desk. She opened her laptop. The spreadsheet was still there. The one with the 63 vessels and the 22 years of records, and the total at the bottom that she had finally let herself look at. The total was not the only number anymore. There were other numbers now. The number in Elias's spreadsheet. The number of captains who had filed challenges. The number in Suleiman's folder. The number in Dr. Chan's datapad. The number in the arbitrator's ruling. The number that said the clause meant what it said. The number that said the law was the law. The number that had been there the whole time, waiting for someone to read it. She closed the spreadsheet. She did not need it anymore. The numbers were in the world now. They were in the record. They were in the ruling. They were in the system. The system could not unsee them. The system could not unknow them. The system could not go back to the way it was before. She opened a new document. She wrote a letter. She addressed it to every captain who had filed a challenge. She told them about the ruling. She told them that the clause meant what it said. She told them that the inspectorate's enforcement actions had been declared unlawful. She told them that the coalition was required to return everything that had been taken. She told them that the number they had been carrying was no longer theirs to carry alone. It was in the record now. It was in the world now. It was not going anywhere. She wrote. We read the document. We found the clause. We did the math. We told the arbitrator the numbers we had been carrying. She heard us. She ruled. The law is the law. It has always been the law. It was just waiting for someone to read it. We read it. She read the letter twice. She made one small change. She sent it. She closed her laptop. She made coffee. She stood at the galley window. The dock was quiet. The colony station was small. It was not the kind of station that drew attention, but it was a station. People lived there. People worked there. People waited for supplies and thanked the captains who brought them and went back to work. People read documents. People found clauses. People learned that the law had been on their side the whole time, and they had just not known it. She finished her coffee. She put the mug in the sink. She walked to her cabin. She lay down on her bunk. She closed her eyes. She did not dream. She did not need to dream. The numbers were in the world now. The clause was in the world now. The law was in the world now. It had always been in the world. It was just waiting for someone to read it. She slept. The ship was quiet. The dock was quiet. The station hummed its low, steady hum. The Amaranthin sat in its berth, scarred and tired and still. The same ship it had always been. Nothing changed on the outside. Nothing different, any passing eye. Just a dented freighter at a small station, its ramp down, its systems on standby, waiting for the next cargo, the next route, the next thing that needed to be moved. Inside, a woman was sleeping. She had been carrying a number for 28 years. She had let it go. The number was in the world now. It was not going anywhere. She woke at 0600. She made coffee. She sat at her desk. She opened her laptop. The messages were waiting. 321 of them. Captains who had read her letter, who had heard the news, who were writing back to tell her that they knew, that they had read the clause, that they had done the math, that the numbers they had been carrying were no longer theirs alone. She read them. She read them slowly. She read them the way you read something when you need to hear that it is real. She read the last message. It was from Suleiman Okongo. His grandson had written it. It was short. It said, "Grandfather says the number is gone. He says he put it down. He says he is not carrying it anymore. He says thank you." She read it twice. She closed her laptop. She put on her jacket, the one without the tear, the one that still smelled like the ship. She walked out of her cabin, down the corridor, down the cargo ramp. She stepped over the wobble in the middle step. She stood on the dock. The colony station was waking up. Lights were coming on. People were moving. The ordinary machinery of a place that did not stop, that never stopped, that would go on whether the system changed or not. She stood on the dock. She looked at her ship, the Amaranthan, the same ship it had always been. Scarred, tired, still, she had been running it for 15 years. She had been carrying a number for 28 years. She had put it down. She had let it go. The number was in the world now. It was not going anywhere. She walked back up the ramp. She stepped over the wobble. She went to her cabin. She opened her laptop. She started planning the next route. There was cargo to move. There was work to do. There were people waiting. She did not look back. She did not need to. The numbers were in the world now. The clause was in the world now. The law was in the world now. It had always been in the world. It was just waiting for someone to read it. She read it.